Hey, hey, how are you?
White bunch this morning.
I just came in just to see if someone else sparked anything that I might not have thought of in terms of integration. So I'm just kind of listening around.
Nice. Noah, what are you working on this morning? I think we were talking about fan outs.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I got the whole HST thing working.
Nice.
Um, Now I've got to just make a little widget in Docs so people can like unstake their HST if they want to like move it around and then restake it again. And so long as they do so before the epic ends, they'll still be entitled to all the rewards. But it's pretty cool. I hooked it up to Clockwork and it was pretty fun watching Clockwork spin off like 50 transactions and distributing it all.
The 44 parties in the ecosystem are happy.
Yeah, yeah. Talk about high impact work. Gonna make some, but they're very important people, making very happy.
They were important. Yeah, no, it's I've always if anyone has like a technical question, please just interrupt me. But until then, we could just talk about random other stuff between devs. Yeah, it's I've always been thinking about, with Solana having a couple of different examples of locked and vested tokens. If we should actually just convert HSTs to just locked tokens, I think it would require a lot of some probably a governance change to do that, but because it is sort of a change in the nature of them. But it would certainly simplify a bunch of code. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. Lock tokens are already a solved problem. Fan outs and like profit splits and things like that are very much uh not that solved.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I was thinking along those lines when we were chatting about like the HST holders last week, and I was just like, I didn't even realize like how often those don't change hands very often, do they, Abai?
Eh, I can look back. Actually, I'll look back right now while we're talking, but they don't really. I mean, HST was given to the original Nova Labs team,
Yeah.
and their investors. And so they just don't have a lot of reason to move.
Yeah.
And actually, if you look at all of the H&T they ever earned, those don't really move around either. These
Yeah.
are like about as, if you want to go into memes, the diamond hands of the diamond hands.
Yeah, I was like, I've always it's the coveted HST. I've always just wanted uh to find someone that would sell one just to say that I had one. It was like a trophy.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, they are securities, right? And
Yep.
so any kind of transfer has to be done in that context.
Yeah.
And so that is like important. So I think only qualified investors can get them or can buy them. Um, yeah, so there's some a lot of rules around it. So that's
Yeah.
probably why they don't move either, right? Like they just don't.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, you have to make sure whoever you're giving it to
They
is
have to
also
be accredited
qualified.
and
Yep.
yeah.
I think so. I'm not a lawyer, of course. So, but I'm pretty sure you have to be an accredited investor to buy one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where we
Yeah.
were running. That's where we were originally running into stuff with like all the splits and stuff like that. It's just there's so many. Oh, someone has their hand up. I will shut
Okay.
up for a second.
Real conversation. Hey Bradley,
Yeah,
how are your projects going? I saw a talk that you guys were doing
yeah.
just recently was it in Nigeria or Kenya?
It's Kenya. So
Okay.
we did one in we first started the first talk was at Strathmore University,
Mhm.
Second one was at Masai Mara University, and we were part of a panel presentation at Nairobi Design Week. So yeah.
Oh, cool. For folks that don't know Bradley's project, do you want to give people an intro? Or I could talk about it too. I just actually was just talking about it yesterday with somebody, so so I'm pretty excited about the work you guys are doing. I'd love to hear about it from you.
Yeah, I can go a bit into what we're doing. So we are working on using helium. We are working on using helium as the framework for an alert system to prevent human wildlife conflict. So what happens is first we set up the gateways at hotels that creates the coverage, and then we have cattle ear tags on cows, and um, there's a BLE tag that's integrated into a lion's collar. But now I think we're moving to LoRa lion collars so that we're working with smart parks. And then there's a large tag that's supposed to be held by herders. So that's a bit, and like now what happens is that um, when the cattle tracker detects the BLE tag that's integrated in the lion's collar, then it now sends a notification to a ranger who's monitoring a dashboard and to the herder whose alert tag is assigned to the cattle tracker. So that's the long and short simple system.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, this is such an incredible use case. I mean, it's like, you know, from a conservation perspective, like it's so cool that like you guys came up with this. So yeah, I love the videos. You want to, if you want to post a link to your video, you can, like, in the chat. I know it's a little off topic, but it's just
Yeah, this sounds awesome. Also, like the ability to, not need a huge battery for wildlife tracking, especially sure you don't want to go back and replace batteries on lions very often. So
The process is actually very expensive to even color like a single lion, and there's like a bunch of bureaucracy involved, like with getting permits and stuff. So yeah, but hopefully we'll get a thing going. Something that I'll post the video. Something that I had a question about was some time back, it was mentioned that it will be possible to identify which data packet was transferred by which sensor once the move to Solana happens.
Mm.
So yeah, that is of interest to us because there's this aspect called lion insurance. So being able to prove that this cow was at this location and the lion was also at this location when the incident happened, and that event is not disputable, would be very helpful because right now it's currently very hard to accomplish it. So they do more consolation than compensation. So because sometimes they're not sure when or where it happened, and like who was at fault when the event happened. So yes, something I
Mm.
wanted for.
Yeah, so for some folks in the group here, so we had this concept that we talked about a long time ago around packet provenance. And the idea here is that um, you could prove that a certain packet went over a certain radio or a certain set of radios, and using trilateration, you can basically sort of provide like additional verification of where the event happened or where the packet came from. So in the shortest form of it, it was like you use one hotspot and you say somewhere in the range of that hotspot. The sort of next version of that was you use three hotspots or multiple or some more than that set of hotspots and say somewhere in the like some trilaterite like some specific location based on the sort of RSSI of each of the packets. And so that was a a concept that we had that we were thinking about doing on chain. With the move to Solana, it doesn't necessarily unlock this, but what I think it can do is, you can have multiple attestations that are written on chain, and then sort of the aggregate of those attestations can be used for a proof. And so we haven't built this yet, but it's something that I certainly would like to start working on, because I think certainly you wouldn't want to do this for every single packet that goes over the Helium network, but there may be some sort of high value packets that are worthwhile doing this for, specifically for things like insurance. Yeah, so no updates yet, Bradley, but definitely more possible when you have like a high throughput chain and cheap chain as well.
Because there's also a number of like carbon related stuff that we are looking at. And like for that aspect, the only way to justify them moving from using GIS as their primary sensing method is that there has to be like a chain piece that that has some level of assurance that this has existed and none of it has been spoofed, because there was the drama that a lot of carbon credits have been faked and stuff. So just now creating like a foolproof system like enables a lot of things.
Yeah, for sure. I think yeah, if I were to start thinking about how to build this, I think we would, there's two places where it could be done. One could be at the it could be at the hotspot level. The hotspot could write a specific attestation directly to a chain. And the second possibility is at the LNS, right, where the packet's actually being purchased. And so that's another spot where you can say like, I bought this packet on the network and I received from the network, here's the hotspot, and I know that the hotspot is located in this place because of its assertion and recent proof of coverage activity. And so, the LNS could essentially write this directly to the chain as well as another attestation. And then, if you have multiple LNSs, that could build your sort of root of trust, right? Or at least the beginning of a root of trust, because, you don't have just one actor writing those attestations. So there's like a couple of different ways that we could build this and design it.
Another way, I've not really understood secure concentrators, but from what I know, they could help in this from like what I've heard a bit about them.
Yeah, that's also true. So secure concentrators are a way to prevent a man-in-the-middle attack between the concentrator, which is sort of the radio that's on the actual hotspot, and the packet forwarder, which is a piece of software that runs on the hotspot. So today, all of the packets that come from the concentrator are not signed by anything, except for our gateway, right? So our gateway uses the hotspot's private key to sign packets on the way out. So there's an opportunity for the man in the middle, like on the actual gateway itself, potentially. And so that's where, some kinds of spoofing attacks can come from. So yeah, the secure concentrator removes that. I think it's still, we're still early days. Like certainly we've had designs of this and some prototypes of this. It's in the process of being scaled up. So it's sort of before we start to see these concentrators in actual hotspots, it needs the sort of manufacturing and all that needs to be scaled up first.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. But like, yeah, however it plays out should be interesting. Bit of a side note. Now moving into the kind of Solana stuff, is that like the project, that the reason why we were part of the panel at Nairobi Design Week was because of Sovereign Nature's Tracing the Wild project in conjunction with KWT. I'm getting the link in a bit. So what they did was make art from data, which was a really interesting process to see unfold. So for seeing like a situation where And like some of that art is both physical, and then there's the NFT side of it. So foreseeing a situation where um, the hotspot NFTs, because we'll have some level of control of all the hotspots that will be inside the Mara. So we'll know all the hotspots that have ever received the packets from like the Lions Laura collars, and now integrating that into their art making process, because now we'll have on top of lion collar data, we'll overlay it with like cattle data and whatever other metrics we set out to record. So I think something really interesting could result from that.
That's super cool. Yeah, if you send me a DM on Twitter, if you start to post stuff like that, I'd love to see it.
Okay.
Always cool to see new stuff. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, Jason.
Okay. Well, I was just listen. That was very cool. I did have a couple questions about the whole. One thing that I was looking for is, do we have? I know that we've talked about it having a 24-hour long period of time, but is there like a certain set of metrics that are going to be hit during that time that are going to get called out? Because there's not going to be a lot of information coming out other than like, oh yeah, we've reached this milestone here, this milestone there. Everything's. I guess I was just looking for do we have like a link or a data point that tells us, oh, we expect this to take so many hours, this to take so many hours, these things will be done by this time, and these are the contingencies for if we go over that time, etc. I don't know if you might have the answers to those questions.
That's a great question. Yeah, so we're going to be publishing, or we plan to publish sort of like what's happening the day of posts over the next couple of weeks. And so that's sort of the plan essentially is, I think it's 10 a.m. is our plan to halt the existing Helium L1, and then we'll take the snapshot, which should take about an hour to 2 hours right now.
Yeah, so there's a few steps here. Step one is we like take the snapshot from the current chain once it's shut off, which I think takes about 30 to 45 minutes. And then we need to load that snapshot into Solana, which kind of involves breaking it down into a bunch of Solana transactions and then compressing them and inserting them into a Merkle root on chain. That takes an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then there's, a lot of little things that need to be basically like environment variables need to be flipped kind of thing, and services need to be restarted. But that's basically it. Like we could potentially be done with the migration in, 3 to 4 hours, but we're giving ourselves 24 hours just to make sure we kind of cover everything, because, things can go wrong. If that, export to Solana fails midway through for some new reason, some new bug that we never saw before, you've now got to wait another however long for it to get back to that point. So
Yeah, so for the sake of the recording, the 3 to 4 hour remark is not something we can back. Right?
yeah,
Like, it's just like we are overestimating the amount of time it'll take on purpose, and we want to make sure that it's done correctly. And also if we need to slow some stuff down on the import into Solana, we can buy time that way as well. From a user experience, I think the most important thing is like every single user interface that we can control will have some kind of notification on it that we're in the middle of the migration. So it's already built into the wallet app. We'll have like banners on Explorer. It'll be on helium.com. I think there'll be probably some tweets, there'll be some messages on LinkedIn, like just pretty much any place where people ever, think about interact with Helium, like there'll be some kind of banner or notice. We're also working with PR and press to like make sure that it's well known around the, in the in other venues as well. And then, we've worked with folks, we've certainly worked with some of the centralized exchanges. A lot of them have plans around, pausing withdrawals and deposits so that there's no balance changes on their side. They can keep trading and stuff like that if they want to, but they don't want their main wallets or operational wallets to change balances during a period like this. So, we're working with custody providers so they can work with their customers. One actually really great idea that I heard yesterday that we hadn't actually considered is to work with some of the staking providers today on Helium Cell 1. And I sort of owe a follow-up to some of those folks today. So we're trying to reach people where they are and like make sure everybody kind of knows like here's the chain of information that you need to keep following essentially.
Right. I guess that kind of actually rolls into my second thought was there's been lots of like I still, I'm very interested in staking HNT in this process, but I haven't even seen like what's a is there any information regarding what that like what even like the what do you the what the interface will look like, especially during like the first week during the whole land rush period. I was trying to make some decisions about that. I didn't know if some of those things have been ironed out or if we have some previews or anything like that.
Yeah, we will soon. If you want, I can give a demo now.
I'll go right ahead.
Yeah, so let me see how we've got it, to the point where it's basically all working, but we're still ironing out somehow. I can't screen share.
All right, we'll throw a demo up somewhere.
Yeah, well, once we have it ready, we'll throw a demo up, but yeah, it's all going to be through this thing called Realms, which is like Solana's main governance UI. And we've just added a place in there where you can go and stake your positions basically. So when you get to Realms, like it'll show you kind of like helium.vote. It's going to show you like all of the proposals and stuff that are being voted on. And then there's a little thing in the top right corner that says my governance power. And obviously, if you haven't staked anything, you don't have any governance power. And then when you click that, it'll give you the option to go lock tokens up. And then you'll have, kind of a grid of your locked positions because you can have various, you can have 100 HNT locked up for 4 years and 1,000 locked up for 6 months, et cetera, et cetera. And then it'll kind of show you your voting power and that, if you have a decaying position, that'll change over time.
Right. Did I also hear correctly that you're going to be allowed to like say like once you stake it, that creates a certain amount of VE token power, but you can switch it between IoT and mobile? Is that correct?
Yeah. So this is actually a really important part of how the subDAOs function. And you definitely, if you choose to stake your HNT, you should definitely delegate it to a subDAO. And so what delegating to a subDAO does is, for one, 6% of the token emissions of that subDAO go to delegators. So, if you delegate to the IoT subDAO, for example, you would earn IoT tokens. And then the second thing that it does is it actually improves that DAO's utility score, which makes it so that the DAO earns more HNT. And kind of, the way this works is HNT goes into the DAO treasury and you're always able to burn the tokens of that DAO and exchange them for some HNT from that treasury. So, each DAO wants more HNT basically.
Is that a true burn transaction that's occurring when that happens?
Yeah, tokens do get burned as you redeem them for HNT from the treasury.
Oh, so we expect both mobile and IoT to be deflationary.
Yes. As people burn them, but there's
Yeah.
the treasury price is kind of a floor price, right? Like if there's other reasons to have that token, for example, like voting in that DAO, you expect there to be a market price, and that market price, you know, basically you would expect someone who's arbing it to go and burn tokens when the market price falls below the treasury price. So, you know, you might not, the best route might not always be to burn the tokens. It might be to trade them with somebody else who wants tokens. Because there is no way to buy tokens, you can only earn them through mining. So we'll probably end up hooking up this thing called Jupiter, and it'll be very clever about trying to check what your best path is. Like, is your best path to burn 50% of it and then buy or, you know, sell 50% on the open market? You know, that kind of logic.
Oh, okay. And does that go true too with like the service provider? Like if we've heard some stuff about onboarding service providers. Are those going to be burn transactions as well, and Oracle transactions if they become available?
Abai, what happens when you onboard a service provider? I'm not too familiar with them.
Yeah, so service providers are, the entity, at least for the mobile sub-DAO, service providers are, think of them as carriers, right? So Helium Mobile is going to be a carrier. And then, some other carriers may also want to use the Helium network that's being built by the mobile sub-DAO. And so, yeah, so those service providers earn if they lock in HIP, we define it as 500 million mobile. If they lock that much mobile, they're able to onboard as a service provider. They might get other benefits outside of just being able to earn mobile for actually doing the work of bringing demand to the network. And so those are all mobile tokens that are being issued. And so they would also, if the service provider wants to redeem them into H&T, they would, they could burn it as well. Yeah, Brainstormer has said they're essentially staking mobile, right? They're locking mobile for a period of time while they want to be a service provider in order to earn the emissions for being a service provider.
Okay, what's the emissions curve for service providers? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's defined in HIP 53. And essentially, so right now we don't have any service providers, so there is no emissions. And so then after, the first one comes online, right now they're sort of, the HIP actually defines it as 20% of emissions, of mobile emissions. I actually think it's worthwhile for us to clarify this. I think it's a weird for if you onboard yourself as a service provider but provide no actual demand to the network.
That's just what I was thinking.
Yeah, no, it's that was underspecified, I think, in the HIP. In my mind, it was always like, you bring data and should be scaled based on the amount of data that you bring. So I actually have a note. It's in my sort of long list of to-dos, but I think it's important to specify this. It's okay right now, given that we don't have any service providers, but I think it should be clarified before the first one gets onboarded.
Is Helium Mobile planning on doing that onboarding soon, or is that going to happen like in May?
That's their choice, right? Like, so they could be a service provider without being a service provider on and get the emissions, right? So they could do that if they want. I think it'd be foolish of them, but yeah. So I think what I would say is that if there's a service provider, if they come to the network and say, hey, we would like to be a service provider, I think the first thing that I would want to do is vote on a clarification HIP first. And I would propose that to the community and be like, okay, so let's consider them as a service provider, but let's also sort of make a change. And I think it's also important. The HIP 53 didn't specify exactly what they have to do. Like, are they staking VE mobile? Are they locking their tokens? Are they sending it to a multi-sig to get issued an NFT? Like, what is the rewardable entity? So we have this like concept of rewardable entities today, and the only one is a hotspot. But with HIP 51, 52, and 53, there could be other rewardable entities, right? You can have mappers, you can have service providers. In an early version of HIP 52, we actually thought about manufacturers as being rewardable as well. If they stake a lot of IoT tokens, we pulled that out of the final version of the HIP again, because it was just like not very well thought out at the time. And so we didn't want to like confuse the vote. So I think, I think this clarification HIP should also specify like, okay, this is a rewardable entity. It's called a service provider. Maybe it's defined on chain as an NFT, and to get that NFT, you have to lock up 500 million mobile. I think that's, and I haven't really talked to a lot of folks about this yet, so maybe getting really, really too far in the weeds, but, I think it'd be, I'd still want to think through whether or not it's VE mobile, which gives them governance rights, or if it's just a lock and independent of governance rights. Yeah, brainstormer was about that vendor one.
Well, definitely interesting. Well, I appreciate the info. I gotta get going, but hopefully that we can get some of that stuff ironed out.
For sure. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get pressure as soon as the Nova guys are like, so yeah, we're ready. But yeah, no, I have a couple of bullets that I like. It's not really a HIP that I think should, we just need to flesh out. Maybe shove it into chat GPT or something and get a HIP. Just kidding. I'll actually write it. Terrible joke.
Actually, I mean, I kind of wonder if you could train ChatGPT on the existing HIPs and then like give it the gist of what you want to write, and then it like fills in the details.
Well, it's very similar. Like I was interested in that Tully GPT thing that they put out for the Solana documentation. It's pretty cool. Like it's crazy.
I used it last night to help my wife write an email. This technology is wild.
I think that I've been using it probably like since it's come out. I've probably used it. I've used it multiple times a week now, just to like, I don't know, just it gets rid of the writer's block at the beginning, and then you just are able to extrapolate off of whatever it gives you, and it helps. It's definitely helpful.
Yeah, it is. I'm getting a feel for it still, like which things it's going to be able to answer versus what Google is going to do a better job, and like how big a questions you should ask it is also interesting, because you're not like, if you write a whole script and you just have it help you debug parts of the script, it's not as high leverage as if it had written the entire script to begin with. And then
I found this really interesting one the other day where this guy had it was this very, very long prompt, but he basically was telling Chat GPT to become an expert in Chat GPT prompt writing. And basically like created this template where it would just make like you'd give it a subject, and then it would use places where it would put in its own variables and give you just a giant list of prompts that might be helpful. And it was really crazy to see exactly what it came up with. And it was brilliant. Like a lot of this was just brilliant. I was like, wow, this is really, really fun to mess around with.
Yeah, I think this is the first time in my life that I've seen how I'm gonna get like deprecated as I get older. Like you kind of saw it where like the younger generation of programmers came in and they were really, really fucking good at Googling things. And that's like a differentiating factor. And that makes it harder if you like weren't able to, because as you get older, it's harder to learn things. This is the first time I saw something, I was like, oh no. The younger generation is going to grow up with this and they're going to eat my lunch.
Yeah, 100%. Because I remember it was the same exact thing. Like still with my dad, I'm like, all right, yeah, just search for it. And he's like, how do I? Like this full sentence. I'm like, Dad, now just like break it down. I think that's something that like that skill was definitely automatic with our generation of people. It's just like, okay, what are the minimal amount of keywords I need to find exactly what I want?
Yeah,
Now
exactly.
they can literally just put in anything and it's gonna, someone who's good at writing prompts is gonna be light years ahead of everybody else in the future.
That's all right. 10x engineers can turn into 9x engineers. Yeah, that's right.
Abai, did you see that? The guy who's making basically he fed it Solana's validator repo and trained the model off that with ChatGPT. Now he has it'll write out your developer documentation for you.
Yeah, for sure. That's super cool. Brainstormer, you asked a question in the chat. Are we working with the Radium and Orca teams to set up the LP pairs? We actually are. So the idea here is that what I'd like to do is actually just have a demo in DevNet. DevNet, some of these tools in DevNet aren't as good as mainnet. Typically, like we followed a slightly different path, I guess, than a lot of teams in the Solana ecosystem, where they just kind of go straight to mainnet. We already have an existing token base and an existing user base, so I wanted to be able to test everything in DevNet first. But so I'd like to have a demo on DevNet showing an Orca pair or like a pool, and actually a Camino integration as well, before we get to mainnet. So that's kind of one of the things that I'm working on right now. The ones that I'm looking at are, at least right now, it's HNT Sol, and then IoT HNT and mobile HNT. And then I feel like with Jupiter, everything else will just happen naturally. Yeah, like this is the sub. Sorry, I'm just answering the questions that he's asking in chat. Hopefully chat questions show up in the recording. But yeah, the sub-DAO not looking at sol pairs because I feel like that's solved by tools like Jupiter. Like if you want to go straight from, let's see, IoT to sol, like you can go through either through the treasury or through the HNT pair. But yeah, all the toolings in TypeScript, and man, no will laugh at me, but I'm slowly getting better at TypeScript. Prefer if it was all in Rust.
I would love if you could somehow write like a meta definition of your SDK and have it generate clients in both TypeScript and Rust.
Me too.
Because it's just a lot of like the only real hard part is it's just a bunch of account munging.
That's right.
And honestly, like we have custom resolvers, but they're not that many of them. The main thing is that I wrote a feature into Anchor TypeScript that resolves PDAs and has one relationships, and that alone makes things like so much better. But that doesn't exist in Rust, and nobody's taken the time to write it in Rust, which sucks.
Hey, if the migration goes easy and I'm just sitting around doing nothing, maybe I should work on that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the other thing I thought about doing is like you could create an API that wraps the SDKs, and then people could hit the API to get instructions back. The only like problem I have with that is it's like fundamentally very centralized. Like if you depend on this API.
Yeah, that's right. Like, and you also have then you create a sort of implicit trust relationship with that API that, no idea what that is.
And like you could open source it and then let people run that API, but no one's going to.
Yeah. Also, you can get denial of service. So that API will get denial of service.
Yep.
Like,
yeah, and if you're using an API, that person could very easily return instructions that don't do what you think they're going to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting because kind of when you're working in this decentralized space, like a lot of the things that make for better engineering design patterns in Web 2 you just can't do here. And so you end up having like, a lot of, you end up having like, dApps that are reading from like 30 different sources instead of like going through one.
I actually did have one question. I was wondering, I know we had talked about before about for DevNet um having some way to almost like mimic rewards. Did you have that on your list still just to kind of dump some into a location just so you can test um dispersals?
Yeah, it's on the list.
All good. Cool, man. Just curious because yeah, it's getting to that point where I think tomorrow or actually today we're gonna be hooking everything up to the front end UI and doing some tests, and then we're gonna try to over the weekend or possibly Monday try to do some stress testing stuff and see how many of these we can get in one transaction. Just start bulk uploading these things.
Yeah. Yeah, we will. I can bump that in priority a bit so we can hopefully get working on it soon.
Cool, cool. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's just the burn down list just keeps growing. So we'll
Yeah,
get.
no, I hear that.
No, do you know if Alchemy supports compressed NFTs? Or is it just QuickNode and
I
and
think it's just Triton and
Helios.
and
because
Helios?
it used to be Genesis Go, but then Genesis Go was like, we're not doing it anymore.
I know
Got it.
Alchemy has like info on it, but I don't think they officially support it yet.
Got it. Yeah, Bradley, just heads up, if you are using Alchemy, know that some of the hotspot NFT stuff won't work because they're not supporting compressed NFTs yet. I'm sure they will, like I'm sure it's just a matter of time. Like all these RPC providers are gonna catch up. Dialect launching all their stickers using compressed NFTs, and then forgot who the other project was, but there's Crossmint, I think. There's just a bunch of tooling that needs to be built up around compressed NFTs. And so yeah, so I think third brainstormer. Crossmint and Dialect were the first two.
Yeah, I've been collecting those dialects.
Oh man, I only have one sticker pack. I'm so sad.
I only have one minted, but I've been collecting them. I think I have like 16 maybe now, something like that. I'm waiting on now.
Come on, 16.
Yeah, I got 16. I was like, when they first started doing it, I remember when they first downloaded their app or created their app. I'd been following their project for a while because it was another multi-coin project, and I was just interested in using their tooling for like in-app messaging and being able to like just for this stuff, right? When a dispersal goes out for like a host creating automated messaging from the host to deployer, like you've been paid out type stuff, either like with SMS or email or just like in-app messaging to their dialect. And so I'd been following them for a while, and when they started dropping them, I know I missed out on a couple of them, but yeah, sitting at 16, just waiting.
All right, Marco and I are gonna crush it with our one sticker pack. It's gonna be great.
Did you get the GM one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that one's gonna be cool because that one's that one's just gonna be making new NFTs all the time throughout its entire lifetime. So that'll be awesome.
We should have a helium sticker pack.
Yeah, I think you guys
Our-
definitely should. You're already making the compressed NFTs. Might as well make some.
I'm actually a little confused on, couldn't they just use SFTs for sticker packs?
They could have used SFTs, yes.
I mean, it wouldn't be nearly as fun.
But it would exactly. I think it wouldn't have been as fun. I also appreciate that they use compressed NFTs, not being the first project to use compressed NFTs at scale. Makes me happy.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's like it's going through varying degrees of testing. So when is it called? CrossMint. When CrossMint did theirs was just like a simple single NFT on a single tree, and they, you know, minted it. And that's fine. Dialect had multiple different types of NFTs on the same tree, and then converted to using multiple trees, but they discovered a lot of bugs when they were doing different types of NFTs. And there's also some bugs that I guess they worked out where transfers weren't showing up. So I'm really glad they hammered those out before they get to us. I do suspect that we're gonna have some fun, because we're just like, if you talk about the like complexity level of compressed NFTs, ours are definitely gonna be the worst. Like we've got like multiple trees, multiple different types, like PDAs attached to these things, and they often get minted multiple at a time in a CPI that's like triply nested, and probably at a rate that's greater than a lot of these ones have been going off. So yeah, it's going to be a good test for the indexer. But seems like Helios have it pretty well handled. They've been kind of adding a lot of their own tooling on top of it that kind of watches things for bugs that they've seen before, and then backfills them if it detects them.
Yeah, and I suspect Triton, like they're well known to be able to handle a crap ton of scale. And so I'm sure they are good enough.
Yeah, I mean, the real problem is it's a data infrastructure pipeline, and like no matter how good you are, it just takes 6 months of beating these things with a wrench before they're stable, and it needs actual usage to figure out whether or not you've got bugs. Like it's very hard to ferret out all of the edge cases just in testing. So I'm sure there will be a few hiccups, but hopefully not many. I think it bodes well for us that our hotspots are like minting is the big problem, but they're fairly static once they're minted. Like people don't really move them around wallets, and they don't trade them very often.
Yeah, how often do these meetings happen? Since it's the first one that have come in, I think I'll just be sitting in to download knowledge. Just
We started this was it 4 or 5 weeks ago as a place where devs could just come to me or Noah or other folks on the team as well, Joey, and you know, just pretty much anyone who's like working on like anything related to Helium and smart contracts. I actually think that, and we were doing this for the migration, specifically, like there are a lot of questions around what happens to the API and Oracle data and things like that too. So, you know, we wanted to have this space for that purpose. The more I think about it, I'm actually like kind of excited about doing this maybe once or twice a month going forward for the foreseeable future. Just because like it's sometimes useful to just talk through stuff that, you know, people are working on. It'll be all engineering as much as we can, except for the occasional tangents into sticker packs, I guess. But you know, that's our goal is that like we just get to just have a place for us to do dev office hours essentially.
It's pretty cool. Because I've not really worked on anything on chain yet. I just have an index of tools that I know that when I start, these are the ones that I'll use. So like Alchemy, Anchor. When the sticker packs and stuff were mentioned, I remember this Project Galaxy had something in that regard, sort of, where like you had to accomplish a task and then get an NFT. But now just getting an idea of what exists in the landscape could be helpful for the day I decide to like dip my toes into actual on-chain development.
Yeah, there's been a couple of experiments around popes in the Helium ecosystem. And so, yeah, so like there's been a little bit of that, but not a ton, actually. I think it'd be, could be interesting.
So let's see what results from this.
Yeah, there's potentially some interesting things you can do, because didn't Heliport prove that you could send like Solana transaction through a low rel
Yeah,
hotspot?
that was super cool to see.
Yeah, it's like what a cool like use case of, I think like a long time ago I said something uh at a talk that was like, helium's the network of last resort, like LoRaWAN, just given the range and given the sort of ability to just like always like, one hotspot goes down, it doesn't matter. There's so many others in the area that still can provide access and coverage. So like, that is a super cool use case. I think what we need from that demo is to be able to prove it on the receiver side and, using like a TIFF or something like that.
Yeah, it'd also be neat if, I think right now every hotspot is like hooked up to an internet connection, but if you could just like, chain them through the desert where there is no internet connection, and then like it's gotta, ping pong through a bunch of different hotspots, but like you still are able to do things.
Okay,
LoRaWAN has an actual concept around this, or called relays. Um,
We
it-
all the relays. We are all familiar with those back in the day.
yeah. And so there's a relay protocol or spec in LoRaWAN. So that is actually possible. I mean, I think you got to have a mix of it, right? Like I think it's important to have connectivity, like real connectivity in these places as well. And so, there's a lot of value if you could have a single node satellite backhaul, because you're also potentially providing not just lower end coverage, but also data access for cellular devices or other kinds of devices as well.
I'm actually
Wait,
curious, how does Heliport confirm the transaction that they send out over lower one? Is there a spec to get data back?
So what they're doing is they are so they over LoRaWAN they're getting the most recent block hash, and so you have to trust whatever RPC you're using there, and so then that's how they're able to then sign the transaction, send it back over LoRaWAN and then because of that you can generate a confirmation, and then that confirmation, that's the part that's still like you just have to assume that the other device does have access to internet or something like that, because you're sort of verifying confirmation. If you really wanted to do this, pure bunker mode, like only over LoRaWAN, you'd need to have enough information to verify that a future block um, or future set of transactions were in a certain block. And so you'd have to be able to do that sort of, is this transaction in this block verification on that other device? And then, and be able to gather just enough data over LoRaWAN, because obviously you don't want to have every single block and all of the transactions going through. You would just need all the transaction hashes and, be able to generate the Merkle root of that particular block, I think. So that's like the sort of transaction inclusion proof that you'd have to run on the receiving device, and you'd probably need like a Diet client for that, or something like a Diet client for that.
I mean, if you can communicate with the RPC, as long as you trust the RPC, then, which most of us do, you send a transaction and then you ask it if it's been confirmed.
Yeah, and you don't actually need to trust the RPC necessarily. You just need to know of some history that you did trust, and then the series of hashes along the way, right? Because you could essentially do that inclusion proof across the blocks. And so you could, you're effectively doing like proof of history, I think.
Yeah. So you can still, like right now, you can kind of bunker mode it.
Yeah, I think you can. It's somewhat it's really close to just being a very, very good offline, like almost offline version of guaranteeing a transaction on chain.
Yeah, because that would be, I mean, you can't even, traditional payments, you can't even do that, right? Like traditional payments, you always have to have a good internet connection.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think the example of like the only other example that I'd really like that's similar here is, you know, lightning payments. You can do almost completely offline lightning payments now.
Oh, interesting. What happens? They just settle when somebody gets back online.
Exactly.
Doesn't that run the risk of somebody emptying their account before that you're able to settle the transaction, kind of like a bounce check?
It's possible if the lightning channel can be modified before. I'm not an absolute expert in lightning, so I probably, that is probably the limit of my knowledge here. But there's some like interesting ideas that Lightning Labs team were talking about a couple of years ago around this stuff, and I think it'd be cool to see LoRaWAN used for other network transactions as well, not just Solana.
Solana is probably easier because Tolly has so aggressively limited my transaction size. He did it personally, despite me.
Can't wait for someone to clip that and post it somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, right. Totally personally made the transaction small. Well, apparently there's like there have been talks of increasing the transaction size on Solana, but there's like a lot of low level consequences to doing it because it, you know, makes the network burden higher.
Yeah, validators would have to be beefier, and that's just, it's terrible.
Yeah, I think I've always found that the better answer is when you've hit the transaction size limit, it's you who's doing something wrong, not Solana, and you need to redesign so that you can, you know, get around that requirement. I think the fan out wallet is actually kind of a good example of this, where like if you're thinking about how can I like take all the funds going into one wallet and distribute it out to N wallets, your initial thought is going to be, okay, just in one transaction, I'll send them all. But transaction size limits mean that you can't fit all of the wallets you need to distribute to in one transaction. And so you need to get a little bit more creative and change the way that you're thinking about the problem so that you can break it down into smaller transactions.
Right.
And then that also usually happens to be more performant.
Jason, you're asking about Laura text and voice. I mean, there's actually there's been a lot of, like, if I forget where I saw it, maybe it was on Hackaday, about a year or two ago. But you know, there have been some ideas around using LoRaWAN for sending text messages. It's like actually perfectly fine for that. Voice, there probably isn't a compression codec that will work for voice unless you are okay with very, very long pauses between your voice messages.
I remember back in the day, Travis talking about setting up, he was telling me how someone had created something where you could send an entire photo, but it was sending it like pixels at a time. And I was like, we should create the first helium powered NFT, um, NFT site, just like in sending these images back and forth over LoRaWAN. He was like, yeah, it was gonna be something insanely gargantuan just to send one of these images. And he's like, yeah, that'll slow everything down. So let's not crash this thing right now.
Found it. That's MSG, the LoRaWAN messenger, or the LoRa messenger, I guess.
Do you remember the people were sending around the photos of those the doomsday messengers and stuff as well back like a year and a half ago? I remember seeing those, the LoRaWAN ones. They were pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's cool about this idea of thinking about messaging is that, you know, we already have existing municipal kind of messaging systems. So like, you know, pagers, like that still exists. You know, doctors still carry them, turns out. And you know, and they, so that these protocols are still running in cities. could be reasonable for as like cities are less able to sort of maintain this aging infrastructure. Could this fall back to something like LoRaWAN? And I think the answer is probably yes. I think just it requires this network to be trusted and resilient and widely available. But I certainly think for kind of municipal reasons, for municipal use cases, like this could be a reasonable network to trust, especially in cities that have effectively infinite coverage. I think we're a little over on time. Anyone have any other questions specifically relating? I know we've sort of gone on a couple of tangents here, specifically relating to the migration, smart contracts that you're looking at, anything around the API or data that's available. Yeah, just happy to answer any final questions before we call it.
When will the mappers data be available?
The what?
The mappers.
Mappers, specifically the mobile mappers or the or LoRaWAN mappers?
The LoRaWAN.
I think you can use mappers today. Maybe I'm not understanding which.
Okay, but there was some time back that we were talking with Neil about how to like enhance their trilateration model, and there was like some issues with access to the mappers data.
Oh, got it. I know that Neil has been publishing, sort of proof, like at least videos of their like company's trilateration model that they're doing. And I also know that so Semtech has this chip, the LR1110, which has been packaged into some Broan devices and some other devices, that also uses something that they call it's called LoRa Edge. And so they have like yeah, that's right, it's LoRa Edge. So yeah, so they have like a way to do this already, using, and you can use all these kind of sensors on the Helium network. And then there's a couple of other companies that are also trying to do sort of other kinds of trilateration, using LoRaWAN gateways. So there's a couple of different tools like that. I don't think anyone's like published, here's an open source version of this. Not yet, at least.
Okay.
But I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, please post. Sure. Thank you guys. I think we'll be back next Friday, same time-ish. And yeah, back at it for us.
Sweet. Thanks, y'all.
See you later.